Okay, this class is designed to make everything else make sense, right? So that's what we've been working on, trying to understand, like, where does the Torah come from, and what are the different parts of the Torah, and all these words you hear. So today's actually, last time we learned some very, very important words. We'll review them, and then I'm actually going to show you some of what we said. Again, the story so far, quickly, is that all of Judaism, Jewish texts, starts where and when? Where did Jewish texts begin?
Mount Sinai.
Good, Mount Sinai, right? What happened at Mount Sinai?
Moses received the Torah.
Good. The Jewish people all stood there, all 2 million or so of them, right? And Hashem started giving the Torah. Everybody heard it, right? But all everybody heard was commandment number 1, commandment number 2. Then the people said, this is too intense for us. Moshe, you please go up the mountain, get the rest of it. Hashem said, I agree. Everybody heard Hashem say, Moshe, come up the mountain to get the rest of the Torah. And then Moshe went up for 40 days and 40 nights, came down with the rest of the Torah. Unfortunately, I had to break the tablets because they were worshiping a golden calf. Went back up, 40 days, 40 nights, and came back to the Torah. Okay, now we said the Torah really breaks up into 2 parts. The written Torah, which is the 5 books of Moses, right? The 5 books of Moshe, called the Chumash, right? And we've been discussing the oral Torah. And we said that without an oral Torah, the written Torah doesn't make any sense, right? When Hashem gave the written Torah to Hashem, when Hashem gave the written Torah to Moshe, he must have given an oral Torah with it, or else the Torah doesn't make any sense, right? Somebody want to give an example, what we said? How do we know there must be an oral Torah? What? Kosher slaughter, good. It says in the Torah that when you slaughter an animal, you must slaughter it in the way in which I have shown you. Any of you vegetarians? No, okay, good. Then we can talk about slaughtering animals, right? So when you slaughter an animal to eat it, it must be slaughtered in the way in which I showed you, right? Where in the Torah does it say the way I've shown you? It doesn't. You could read it cover to cover. All it says is that you should slaughter an animal in the way in which I've shown you. So if you believe that the written Torah was given from Hashem, you must believe that an oral Torah was given with it, or else the written Torah itself doesn't make any sense. It says slaughter an animal in the way in which I showed you, and it doesn't say what that way is, right? If you look at the second page, right, there are a whole bunch of examples of things that we could never know without the oral Torah, right? If you look down in the middle where the bullet points are, it doesn't say in the Torah anywhere how to get married, right? It does say that people got married, but it doesn't say how to do it, right? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah what tefillin should look like. It says that there's something called totafot that we should wear, but we mentioned last time we wouldn't know what that is if it weren't for the oral Torah. Right? The fact that there's prayer, which you might have noticed is a big part of Judaism, but it's not in the Torah. It doesn't say anywhere in the written Torah you must pray, right? Or that you should pray, or how to pray, or what you should say when you pray. All of that's part of the oral Torah, right? We talked about what type of work is forbidden on Shabbos. All it says in the Torah is that you shouldn't do malacha on Shabbos, whatever that means. We aren't even really sure what the word malacha means. Right? The oral Torah explains what that means in the 39 categories of work we don't do and what they are, and you can do this and you can't do that, right? And that certain parts of the Torah, while the Torah in general is meant to be taken literally, there are certain parts that if you took it literally, you'd end up with a very warped system of Judaism, like an eye for an eye, right? Which we don't believe in, right? There have been sadistic, difficult systems that do that kind of thing, right? But Judaism has never ever done that kind of thing, even though it says an eye for an eye in the Torah, and even though we take the Torah literally. Why? Because the oral Torah says that particular verse isn't meant to be taken literally, right? And it explains why, right? So if all of these things without the oral Torah wouldn't make any sense, it must mean that if you're going to pay any attention to the written Torah, you have to understand that an oral Torah was given with it, which we've explained was Hashem, when he told Moshe the Torah, he said, Moshe, write this down word for word, letter for letter. Now stop. Don't write this part down. Let me explain it to you. Explain that to the people when you give them the Torah. It's not going to be written down anywhere, but explain it to them when you give it to the next generation, right? That we've explained already. Okay? Now, we also talked about, you guys I'm sure have the question of, but didn't it get messed up over the generations, right? This game of telephone of people telling it to the next generation. We're not going to repeat that now, but we have discussed about why we are aware of that question and nevertheless can still believe in an oral Torah, right? We also discussed the question of why Hashem did it this way, and one of the reasons we gave was what? Anybody? Why did Hashem do it this way? Why didn't he just write it all down? So we said a few different reasons. One of them is so that you'd have to learn Judaism from a person, right? You can't learn Judaism from a book. It must be learned from a living, breathing person who themselves is trying to live it, who learned it from somebody else who was living Torah, right? And therefore you learn not just information, but you actually learn the way of life, right? That's one of the reasons why Hashem did it this way. Okay, now we said the oral Torah was oral, right? It wasn't written down anywhere. But as time passed, the Jews were getting sent into exile in about the year 200 CE, and there was a real danger that the oral Torah was going to be lost as people went out and ended up someplace where there was no Torah scholar around, or the Torah scholars who were around wouldn't have anybody to check with, right? They didn't have any technology that they could be in touch with each other. If you ended up in a place, because of exile, you ended up in Babylonia or in Spain or in Morocco or anywhere else, right? You weren't going to have access to the oral Torah. So Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi came along, and what did he do? Wrote down the oral Torah for the first time ever. And what was written in the, what did he call his compilation of the oral Torah? Who? Somebody said it? No, that comes much later, right? We'll get there, not in this class, but we'll get there, right? What was it called? The Mishnah, right? And we mentioned how many sections was the Mishnah broken up into?
7.
No. Go down one. 6. Very good. Right? Excellent math. Right? If anybody knows the song we sing at the end of the Passover Seder, who knows one? I know one. Right? So who knows 6? I know 6. 6 is the books of the Mishnah. So what's the Mishnah? The Mishnah is the written form of the oral Torah. Okay? Now we mentioned there was so much oral Torah that when Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who was the rabbi who wrote this down, right, when he went around to all the different study halls and says, I want all of your notes, I want you to tell me everything that's ever been discussed in this study hall, he ended up with way too much information to include. So this is the bare minimum that you could ever get away with calling a book of the oral Torah. Right? He just included the bare minimum. It's very long, it's 63 volumes. Right? And yet, it's the bare minimum of the oral Torah that he could limit himself to writing down. He also wrote it, as we said, in like code form, right? So that you still couldn't learn it on your own. You'd have to have somebody to show you how to learn a Mishnah. Right? You couldn't just, it doesn't read like a text that you could just pick up a novel and start reading, right? It's still something that's got to be worked through, and you've got to know the system of how to study it. So that's, at that point, the study of Torah switched from studying written Torah with just you had to hear from somebody who knew what they were talking about, the oral Torah, to you could study the written Torah, and now you could actually have a book in front of you to study the oral Torah. It's still to be studied, right? But you could now study from a book. Now we said over the next 300 years, as exile got worse, even that wasn't enough. Because as we said, having a Mishnah is only good if you have somebody around who can teach it to you. Right? But what happens if I'm around and I don't know even how to approach a Mishnah? Like it says these words, but I don't know what to do with them. Right? Well, does this mean this or does it mean that? And how come I use this word? And how come all those questions I don't know the answers to anymore? So the rabbis of the time, 300 years later, in about the year 500 CE, went around in Babylonia and they collected all of the explanations people had given about the Mishnah. They went to the study halls and they said, we know you've been studying these Mishnahs. Every Mishnah, tell us all the discussion you've had about it. And they collected it and they put that together in a book. What's that called? Gemara. Very good. Gemara. And Mishnah plus Gemara together equals? Talmud. Very good. So you guys are now in the 1% of Jews across the world who actually know what these words mean. Right? You, I'm sure, have heard people say on your program and in Nineveh and your synagogue rabbi, right, stand up and says, well, it says in the Talmud, and everybody shakes their head and says, oh, well, it says in the Talmud, right? But now you actually know what the Talmud is. The Talmud is the Mishnah and Gemara. The Mishnah was Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi's 6-volume version of the Oral Torah. The Gemara is a discussion about what this Mishnah means. Each Mishnah, most of the Mishnah, has a section of Gemara that explains how the experts studied this Mishnah and what information they got from it. Okay? Now I actually brought with me, for you, a copy of a page of Talmud. And we're going to look at what it looks like and I'll explain to you what it is. Now before we start, I'll just show you. This is, well, you know what, look at your sheet first. Okay, this is a page of Talmud. This is from the tractate called Chulin, right, which is about most laws of keeping kosher are in this tractate called Chulin. Okay? Now, if you look at, you see, this is the very beginning, right? So the first word is always in this very pretty box, right? That's just something the printing press did. Maybe there's some Kabbalistic significance to it, but it really is just a way of making the first page look nice. Only the first page of a tractate has this, right? You see the word hakol in the box, and then you see there's 1, 2, and almost a third line, and then I marked it off there, it ends, and there's a big gimel and a big mem. You see that? What do you think gimel mem stands for? Gemara. Good, right? So you've got, what do you think this little section is here, starting with the word hakol? It's a Mishnah, right? And then, having quoted this very short, just 3 lines. By the way, this section in the middle is the Talmud. Around it is commentary. I'll explain what that is soon. But right, this is the Talmud. This little section, these 3 lines, is Mishnah. And then it says Gimel Mem, and we start with the Gemara's explanation of this Mishnah, right? For example, this Mishnah starts with the word hakol. What does hakol mean? Anybody know? You guys taking all fun, are you? Good, right? Hakol means everything or all. So it says hakol shochatin. Everybody can slaughter, right? Meaning everybody. That's what the words of the Mishnah say. Everybody is eligible to be a slaughterer. So if any of you are looking for professions, internships, right? We can give you an internship as a ritual slaughterer. Yeah? Now, so the Talmud says, one second, this code is very specific, right? It talks in very exacting language. Why does it say everybody can slaughter? Who would I have thought can't slaughter? That it's coming to tell me that even though you would have thought they can't, they can. Right? Because the Mishnah doesn't waste words. If it's telling me everybody can slaughter, that means I must have thought everybody couldn't slaughter. So who's it telling me can slaughter? And the Gemara starts discussing, what does that word hakol come to teach me? Right? Now that's the kind of thing that if I'm on my own and I don't know the system of how to learn Mishnah, I might not know how to answer that question. So that's why I have to see, what did the rabbis of this time period, when they studied this Mishnah and they knew what to do, they knew how to study Mishnah, what did they come up with? How did they answer that question? What did they say the word hakol comes to include? And they come and discuss back and forth all kinds of different possibilities. Right? Now, this is a different tractate, which I just happened to bring with me. This is the tractate called Rosh Hashanah. Okay? It's about, mostly, the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. Right? So you see, this is the first page again with a pretty box. Right? Can anybody read what it says in that box? It says Arba. And it says, this Mishnah teaches us that there are 4 times of year that are actually called Rosh Hashanah. There's the obvious one, Rosh Hashanah, and then there are 3 other times. For example, Tu B'Shvat is the new year for trees. That's one of the 4 also. Right? So there are 4 times of the year that are called Rosh Hashanah. So this Mishnah starts in this box, and it goes down to here. It's a longer Mishnah than the other one. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines. Okay, 7 lines of Mishnah here. And then we get Gimel Mem. It starts with the Gemara's explanation of that Mishnah. Right? Now, the Gemara is the rest of this page. All of this, 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 this, keeping going, still going, still going, until we get to here. Right, so up until the end of this page. All of that, right, this is page 15b. That's what that means in a minute. And that was on page 2a. So those 13 pages are entirely Gemara explaining those 7 lines of Mishnah. Right? So it took 13 pages of explanation to explain the words that are in that one 7-line Mishnah. Now, for that reason, when people are studying Talmud, if you know any guys who are in yeshiva, what do they say? When you say, what do you study in the morning? They probably don't say, I study Talmud. They say, I study Gemara. Right? Because for every 7 lines of Mishnah, there might be 13 pages of Gemara. So you spend the vast majority of your time studying Gemara, right? And only a little time studying Mishnah. Now, the truth is, you're always studying the Mishnah. right? Because all the Gemara is an explanation of those 7 lines of Mishnah. But there's so much information packed into those 7 lines of Mishnah that it takes 13 pages when you double click on the Mishnah to see everything that's in there, right? So that's what the Talmud is. The Talmud is the Mishnah, and then all that information that's packed into the Mishnah, unpacking all of it and explaining it. And what we're trying to do is re-arrive at what happened here, right, when Moshe was given the oral Torah by Hashem. So we're trying to arrive at something that is divine, right, written down here, and then the explanation of it written down here, but we're really trying to understand, what did Hashem say, right? Now we'll talk about in a future class why it is that we have differences of opinion and things like that. If what we're discussing is what Hashem said to Moshe, we'll discuss that, but for right now we're going to take that as a given. Yeah?
So if this little box in the middle, what's all this around the side?
Okay, so this, as I said, is the Talmud. Now, whenever you end up with it, somebody writes a Jewish text, what's the next thing that always happens? Okay, good. But they argue sometimes even before that, even in the text they argue, right? What happens once you have a text, though? What do other people start doing? Writing commentaries on that text, right? And we'll see this as we keep going through the history of what happened with Jewish texts. Every time somebody writes a text, immediately people start studying that text and then writing down their commentary, their explanation of that text, right? So on every page of Talmud, there are, almost the whole Talmud, there are 2 commentators that are on the sides. One is somebody named Rashi. We'll discuss Rashi later, right? And the other one is a school of people called Tosfos. You see, I wrote it on the top here. Right, on this side, this is the commentary of Rashi. This is the commentary of Tosfos, right? So if I wanted to study this page of Talmud, what I would do is first learn the Mishnah, then see Rashi's commentary on the Mishnah, then see if Tosfos has any commentary on those 7 lines, then move on and start learning the Gemara with the commentary of Rashi and the commentary of Tosfos, right? And all of it is trying to help me arrive back at trying to understand those 7 lines of Mishnah, which is really trying to portray to me what happened when Hashem said this. Again, remember, we talked about this one line in the Torah that says, when you slaughter an animal, you should do it in the way in which I showed you. This Mishnah was the oral Torah, the beginning of the oral Torah, that goes with that, right? So this is what Hashem, we want to understand, what did Hashem say to Moshe when he said, don't write this part down. Let me just explain it to you and you'll explain it to the next generation. That eventually got written down in the Mishnah and explained in the Gemara. And then even in Rashi and Tosfos have to come and explain it more to me, because as generations go on, we need more and more and more explanation, right? Okay. Now, a couple more things about the Talmud. Again, things you will have heard in your classes. First of all, I mentioned last time, there are 2,711 pages in the Gemara, in the Talmud, right? But what's a page? Only in Judaism do you have to ask, what's a page? We don't know what's a page, right? So you and I would call this a page, right? But not in the Talmud. What's a page? Good. 2 sides, right? This is 1 page. How do we relate to it? How do I tell you which page I'm talking about?
A and B.
Good. A and B, right? So this is page 18A, and this is page 18B, right? So when somebody hands you out a handout and it says on the top, Talmud 18A, now you know what that means, right? It means it's something from this, and it will tell you which tractate it is. So this is tractate Rosh Hashanah. The copy I gave you is from tractate Chulin, right? So if somebody handed this out to you, it would say on the top, Chulin, this is page Bet, which means 2A, right? So when you see something like that, now you know what they're talking about. Yeah.
Can I just clarify something? When you said the 6 different books, one of them was like the Book of Holidays. Was that Moed?
Yes.
So does that mean that that's one of the books of Moed?
Yes.
So
Very good.
within those 6 books, there are like even more like.
Yeah. So this is one of the. Right. Remember, we said the Mishnah, right, breaks up into 6 orders. Right. I'll write them on the board again. There's Zraim. You have this on your sheet actually on page 1. But Zraim, Moed, Nashim, Nezikin, Kodshim, and Taharos. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, each of those 6 orders of the Mishnah, or what we call the Shisha Sidrei Mishnah, right? Each one of those 6 orders of the Mishnah has under it Masechtas, which means a volume, right? A Masechta. Right? A Masechta is one volume of the Talmud. And each one is categorized into these 6 categories, right? So, under the category of Moed, you have one of the Masechtas is Rosh Hashanah. That's this. Right? Now, it was originally just the Mishnah. This is the Mishnah plus Gemara, which is the Talmud. If I wanted, I could go get a copy of just the Mishnah of Masechta Rosh Hashanah. This is the Mishnahs of Rosh Hashanah with the explanation of the Gemara. Right? So every page of Talmud is part of a Masechta, and that Masechta is part of one of the orders, one of the Sidarim. This one happens to be Moed. Chulin, the other one that you have the copy of, is part of Kodshim. Right? So we find it under here, right? And that's where, again, you'd have page, right? You always have page number, letter A or B, tractate, Masechta, right? Masechta, tractate, volume all mean the same thing, right? I don't know what the word tractate means in English, but it means Masechta, right? And then you could figure out which one of the 6 Sidrei Mishnah, which one of the 6 orders is that tractate in, okay? So we have, again, so just to make it clear, like we looked at page 18a and 18b. In Hebrew, right, you know from up here that we use letters to show you numbers, right? What letters make 18 is a famous one?
The Chet and Yud.
Very good. Chet and Yud, right? Chai, right? That's why if you go to a Jewish wedding or bar mitzvah or something, people often give checks in denominations of $18. Right? My wife had a friend, a colleague who was not Jewish, who said, when they got married, she asked my friend, she said, all of our Jewish friends give us these really weird denominations of money. Like, people come to a wedding, they give you $100, they give $150. Not Jews. We give like 156. Like, why 156? It's always divisible by 18. Right? We give numbers of 18 because 18 stands for Chai, which means life. Right? So B'chai is actually backwards. It's really Yud Chet. Right? Yud is 10. Chet is 8. Right? So Yud Chet would be 18. And then we do this. That means A. And that means B. Right? So in Hebrew, if you would see something that says, right, you never thought you could understand this. Right? It says Rosh Hashanah Yud Ches Amud Beis. What does that mean? If somebody tells you this source that I'm showing you now is from Rosh Hashanah Yud Ches Amud Beis. Huh? 18b. Good. It means it's in the volume, the tractate, the Masechta called Rosh Hashanah. Page Yud Chet, which is 18. A. Right? Or B. Right? Very good. Okay, now, one half a page, like what you and I would call a page. This is called an amud. What are the 2 sides together called? What? Okay, good. Right? But we have a word for them. Remember I said it's called a page. How do you say page in Hebrew? Daf. Very good. So an amud is one side of a page, right? A daf is a double-sided page, right?
What's a blot? I know it's my last name.
Oh, very good. A blot is Yiddish for daf. Right, very good. Okay, so a few things about that. Number one, if somebody says, this is in Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, right, which is how you'd hear somebody say it, right? This is from Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, right? Means page 18, side 2. Right? Aleph is side 1 and Bet or Beis is side 2. Right? So that's how you'd hear somebody refer to it. And I'm sure your teachers, as much as they try to speak in English, every so often that one of those slips out, and somebody says, it says in the Gemara, Rosh Hashanah, Daf Yud Ches Amud Beis, and you say, I have no idea what you just said. Right? And you somehow tune it out and keep listening. Right? Well, now you can know. And they just said, it's in Rosh Hashanah, that's the Masechta. Right? Daf Yud Ches, that's page. Amud Beis means side 2. Right? There's side Aleph or Beis or Bet. right? Which is side 1 and 2, or A and B, right? Okay, now, you may have heard of some people, I mentioned this last time, who learn what's called Daf Yomi. Right? What's Daf Yomi?
Page of the day where they do around the...
Good, right? So Daf Yomi, Yom means day, Yomi means daily, right? So the daily page is called the Daf Yomi. There are people throughout the world who learn what's called Daf Yomi. They learn one page of Talmud a day, right? As I mentioned last time, you can go anywhere in the world, look in any Jewish calendar, and it tells you what page Daf Yomi is up to, right? So right now, Daf Yomi happens to be learning the tractate, the Masechta called Bava Kama. I don't know what page they're up to, but let's say they're on page 80, right? So you could look at any Jewish calendar and it would say Daf Yomi, Bava Kama 80, right? Because they're on two sides, so it doesn't have to say A or B, right? And all over the world they're learning that. And if you're in a Daf Yomi class, you can go to anywhere else in the world and you can sit in on their Daf Yomi class because they're learning the same page that you're learning in your town, right? This was instituted about 100 years ago. It's gained in popularity today, right? I mentioned I was at the last time they finished all 2,711 pages. They have a big party. The last one, the biggest one, they were all over the world, but the biggest one in the world was in New York, in New Jersey, in MetLife Stadium, right? I was there and there were 100,000 people there. Right? It was actually the biggest crowd they've ever had because they put seats on the field too, because there was nobody throwing a football around, right? So it was really a wild celebration. Right? I was there with somebody who was there in that same stadium when the New York Giants won the Super Bowl, and he said the celebration was greater at the Talmud celebration than it was when the Giants won the Super Bowl. I mean, it was crazy. Everybody was dancing. You can imagine what the stadium looked like. But so that's people who learn the Daf Yomi. They're learning a page a day, right? Now, this will take us back to what we've been talking about. In yeshiva, when people learn Gemara, right, they often don't learn Daf Yomi. They very often will spend the whole day learning one line, right? In the yeshiva I learned in, sometimes we would learn about a daf a month, not a daf a day, and not a daf a day, right? We could spend a whole month learning one double-sided page of this, right? One time when I was in yeshiva, my rabbi gave 7 classes in a row, each of about an hour and a half to 300 people, right? On one word that was in the Mishnah, right? And after the 7th class, he said, listen, we're going to move on because I can tell people's interest is waning, but you should know I don't think we've scratched the surface yet, right? Because we understand that the oral Torah, those of you who've been here, we talked about that the oral Torah is not a bunch of bullet points. The oral Torah is principles, right? And there's an unlimited depth to that principle. The greatness of the people who wrote down the Mishnah and the Gemara is that they were able to capture a lot of depth in a few words or letters, right? And therefore, it's written with the intention that you should keep pouring at that word and pouring at that letter and trying to figure out what's packed into there. And there's a whole system of how you do that, right? So that's what we're trying to do when we learn. We're not trying to just gather information. It's not like reading, right? It's trying to pull out the information, okay? But any questions on this? So now we know what the Mishnah is, we know what the Gemara is, we know what the Talmud is. We know what a Masechta is, right? We know what an Amud and a Daf are, right? We know that a page in the Talmud is double-sided. So 2,711, by the way, double-sided pages, right? That's 5,422 what you and I would call pages, right? So, right, and we know what an Amud is, we know what a Daf is, you know how to read something like this. So hopefully that helps us when you're going to get handouts of things on it. Okay, next time we're going to talk about things like what the word midrash means, if you ever heard the word brisa, all these other parts of the oral Torah that we haven't discussed yet. Okay? All right. No problem. All right. So a lot of information. Hopefully that helps you guys.
Yeah.